In early July, Anime Expo returned after being postponed for 2 years, and it was an amazing event, at least from what I've gathered. I wasn't able to attend myself, but from what I saw, a lot of people were there. There was a lot of announcements, and there was generally a lot of fun to be had, minus some of the organizational problems that seems to happen with every one of these. And the announcements that I paid the most attention to were the visual novel announcements. There's a lot of really cool shit that was shown off, and in this video, I want to talk about it. Shout out to Ange for letting me use footage of the panels that he streamed over on his channel. I'll put a link in the description for Ange's channel so you can check out the panels in their entirety, and also check out other videos that he's made, because he makes pretty good videos for anyone that's already a fan of visual novels or looking to get into them. Fucking surprise! It was announced a little while ago that MaHoYo was gonna get an English translation in the Japanese version. So people have been ordering the Japanese release in order to read it in English officially. But Type Moon, coming out of nowhere during the Fate Grand Order panel, decided to let everybody know that they were gonna release this in the West, officially. We've been memeing for years that Nasu has hated the West, but guess what? The meme is dead. Long live the meme. Not only is it getting released in the West, but it's going to get a simul release with the release in Japan. That is nuts. In terms of MaHoYo itself, it's one of the most well-regarded VNs of all time, along Tsukihime and Fate Stay Night. Now, I know some of the previews of the translation have left people a little sore because some of the word choices, but I'm still on board with this. This is a day one purchase for me. That's for damn sure. Next up was Axis Games, and they're fairly well known for bringing over a lot of all ages titles, as well as otome games and some fighting games, and a lot of games along that kind of area of the otaku fandom. And their visual novel output usually consists of all ages and non-eroge titles from companies like Idea Factory, and a lot of the stuff they generally put out I'm not super familiar with. I wanted to check this out, if only to get more in tune with the stuff that they do put out, and I got some stuff out of it. So if you're an Idea Factory fan, specifically an otome game fan, you were eating good at that Access panel. Norn 9, one of the first games that was announced, apparently takes place in an old-style Japanese town where there is a globe that floats in the air called the Norn, which seems to house a small town in it. Sorata, who's an elementary school kid, gets teleported back in time to the town where the Norn's floating. And it's got a cast of like 3 girls and 9 boys who go on a journey around the Norn. This was originally released for the PS Vita a good 7 years ago, but now it's getting a Switch port sometime next year, which seems to be around the time period that most of the Idea Factory games announced here are gonna come out. The difference this time being that Norn is also getting its fan disc translated alongside the port, which wasn't translated when it was originally released. Radiant Tale was another otome game that was announced at that Axis panel. It revolves around a girl named Tifa, Leah. She works at a store called Rebel, and one day a performing group named Circus shows up and forces her to become their producer slash assistant. After finding out that the performers of Circus are kind of a motley crew, with one of them being a literal dragon, will the group be able to get their shit together and thrive? Now, this was an interesting announcement because this announcement's coming really quickly after the game came out in Japan, and it's slotted for a release next year. This one kind of did capture my attention because I just get good vibes from it. You ever just seen a game that you're not sure if you're necessarily gonna like, but just something about what you're reading and seeing of it kind of gives you good vibes? That's me with this. I've got a bit of a soft spot for underdog performing arts stories, and I also get the feeling that this has an upbeat, kind of cheerful tone to it, and it just seems like something that would work really well for like an unwind after work kind of game. However, I also don't have a Switch, so I won't be picking this up unless I get a Switch in the meantime. However, if you're a fan of otome games, this one seems to have caused quite a bit of buzz, so I definitely check it out. The last Idea Factory game that was announced at the Axis panel said fuck the upbeat vibes and let's get edgy. Shunen no Viriche Error Salvation, and you know it's edgy because it's got the improper capitalization. The basic synopsis of the game is that there exists a country where people are plagued by a death curse where everyone dies at 23, and they've created a system where they can upload their memories and plant that into new bodies. There's a girl called the God of Death because it seems that everyone she comes in contact with are met with a unfortunate fate. That is, until she comes in contact with a man named the Watchman of Death. Along with other characters, they work to uncover some of the mysteries surrounding the country and its death curse. This looks like the other Otome games if they were written by an Evanescence fan, and I'm not hating though. This isn't the game I'm most excited for out of the Otome releases, that would be Radiant Tail, but if I do get a Switch within the next year, I'll probably check this out when it swings by. Now, this is a game out of time if I've seen one. I'm gonna tell you the truth, nothing I've seen of this has endeared me to it at all. Inescapable is about a group of 11 people, including a protagonist, that have been abducted and put on an island where if they can survive their stay, they'll win $500,000? The catch is, they're being filmed for a reality TV show, and there are no rules on this island, so there's no telling what will happen. The whole setup for this feels like something straight out of like the late 2000s and early 2010s. The thing is, it felt a little more fresh when things like Danganronpa and Zero Escape were coming out, and if we're even going beyond the sphere of anime stuff, this almost feels like something out of the Hunger Games. But the thing is, all that stuff has already come out and made its impact. So I'm not saying you can't make games like this anymore, especially since both of the series I mentioned aren't making new installments. But if you're gonna do that, you really have to find a way to make yourself stand out, and nothing I've seen of this so far has convinced me it's gonna do that. Granted, I don't want to completely just shit all over this, because it could be good, but I just don't feel like it sold itself very well, and I'm just not that interested in it. And it's going to be released on most platforms, including PC, next year. So if it speaks more to you than it does me, maybe give it a look. The final announcement that I was most excited for that was VN related and not a pet shop game is Spirit Hunter Deathmark 2. The trailer for this made it look like 100% my thing. It's a horror visual novel / mystery story where you follow a middle-aged detective as he investigates the inexplicable deaths of students at an academy, which may or may not be caused by malicious spirits. God, the art for this looks so good. It really captures that J-horror vibe without going too deep into a typical looking anime art style. And the creature designs especially, they just have this really surreal vibe to them that is really working for me. And the even cooler thing is that it's coming out for PC, PS4, and other consoles, so you can easily check it out. And apparently there's 2 more games in this franchise that I've not heard of or played, so I've been sleeping hard on this, and I need to get on top of that like right now. So if you're a horror game fan, give this one a look when it comes out next year. Next up on the docket is Spike Chunsoft. They're one of the publishers that I was most looking forward to for AX because they're usually pretty reliable when it comes to banger announcements. And this year was no disappointment. There wasn't anything that I would call a surprise per se, but what they showed I was hoping to see, and I'm glad we're getting them. Chaos Head, Noah, and the Chaos Child bundle, which is coming to consoles and to Steam. Now, Chaos Child was translated a few years back, but Chaos Head hasn't seen an official translation up until this point, especially Chaos Head Noah, which is apparently the better version of the game. Now, it's coming out October 7th of this year, and I've owned a copy of Steins Gate and Chaos Child for a while, but I have been waiting for a Chaos Head translation simply because of the fact that I have these weird mind goblins that tell me that I have to play series from the beginning to the end, even if they're not required to do so by continuity. But it's just how I am. If you're a fan of mystery and science fiction novels, you've probably already played Chaos Child and Steins Gate, so you're more looking forward to just picking up Chaos Head. But if you haven't played any of the previous installments, this bundle is going to be something that's right up your alley. Now, the last announcement at the Spike Chunsoft panel was another part of the Science Adventure series, and that is Anonymous Code. So we're getting the final installment of the Science Adventure series. Anonymous Code's going to come out sometime next year, and that is awesome, especially since I'm looking forward to getting into Science Adventure myself. It hasn't even come out in Japan yet, so it's kind of hard to gauge what the reception of that is thus far, but given the quality of the series as a whole has been so high up until this point, I'm expecting good things from it. They didn't announce a specific release date for this yet, but expect it to come out sometime next year, hopefully. Regardless, the fact that we're going to be fully caught up on the Science Adventure series in English is pretty goddamn exciting. Next up is Neko Project. Oh shit, sorry, I mean Sekai Project. Sekai Project for me can be really hit or miss with their releases, and true to form, this panel was kind of a roller coaster, at least for me. And there's some cool stuff in here, and then there's some stuff that I just could not care less about. So let's get into that. So if you're a fan of Madosoft, then congratulations. You finally got announcements after 5 years of Sekai Project being completely quiet on anything coming out from the studio since Wagamama High Spec. Speaking of Wagamama High Spec, I wonder if we're gonna get that fan disc any day soon. Yeah, no, that's probably wishful thinking. Regardless, Raspberry Cube and Hamadashi Creative, they very much have that comedic slice of life VN story template with some nice art and some H. And I don't want to sound like I'm diminishing them, that's just very much what they are. And from what I've heard, they do that well. So I will probably check those out eventually, but they're not super high priority for me. Next up, we had a headphones collaboration with a YouTuber. Cool. Anyway, Watamari, a match made in heaven. So it's a story of gals being pals. So this trailer really threw me for a loop because it starts with a live action scene that I was not expecting, and when it popped up I had no idea what the hell this was. But besides that, it made the trailers stick out at least a little bit, and also it had some really cool live 2D in the game, which I'm always a fan of live 2D in visual novels. Makes things feel more live. It doesn't look like everything's in live 2D, but when it is, it looks pretty good. It's about a girl that transfers into an all-girls school where there are rituals that make zodiac symbols appear on the bodies of some of the students and our protagonist, who's secretly a member of some kind of agency who's investigating this. And it looks like we'll be getting a simul release of this when it comes out later this year in August in both Japan and in other countries, which is always exciting. Okay, so let me set the scene here for a second. Everything that we had gotten up until this point had the vibe of either being cute girls doing cute things, or at the very least was like an all ages title that didn't feel like it was going to rock the boat too much in terms of challenging content. So imagine my utter bewilderment when this fucking thing showed up. I immediately asked myself, what the hell is this? Well then, Happy Saint Shield happened. Why does the music sound like a cracked out Vocaloid? What's with the over-the-top glitch effects? Why's this girl crying? What's this Sayo Oshi Sayo no Uto bullshit going on in the background? By the end of it, I wasn't scared, just really confused. Now, to be clear, it's not completely unheard of for Sekai Project to put out something darker than, say, for instance, Raspberry Cube. However, this is what I would describe as edgy, which isn't normal for most Sekai Project releases. Now, if I'm going just based off the visuals, it looks like something that is inspired by those early 2000 Zempa games, but with a narrative template of something like Madoka Magica, and I don't really know what to do with that. If you're looking for a plot synopsis on this, well, it's kind of a lot, so I'd recommend reading that on your own. I don't know if I'm excited for this or thinking that it's gonna be good, but the trailer was kind of a mess, and it being kind of a mess I think has made me more interested in it than it would have made me otherwise. If you're not repelled by edgy shit, then maybe give it a look. A Light in the Dark is getting a console release, and with voices this time. And if you got the Steam version, you'll get a patch for that. I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying that announcement. It's just that it's a port and patch announcement. I just don't really have a whole lot to add there. So one of the bigger announcements at Sekai's panel was Parfait Remake. The reason that this was a big deal was because we haven't heard about Sekai doing anything with Giga since Baldur's Sky, and that was over 2 years ago that came out. Now, This isn't something that's going to get me as excited as Baldur's Sky, so that's cool in a contextual sense, and in terms of the VN itself, that's got a good reputation. It appears to be a drama and romance story about a guy who takes over his deceased brother's cafe, and they are competing with a cafe that opened nearby. It's not exactly the kind of story that's going to get me doing backflips in my apartment, but I'm still going to keep tabs on it just because people seem pretty high on it. This version that we're getting is the 2015 remake of the original 2005 version. Now, there's no official release date for this, or as the guy that was doing the panel would say,
again, just follow our progress page. It'll be right there. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know in the portal.
Finally, the last thing on their panel was, oh, really? So somehow, I pulled a self-inflicted Mandela effect. I could have sworn that Sekai already announced that they were working on Inupara and Nekopara after, but then I looked back after I watched the panel and realized that, yeah, wait a minute, they never did. So, yeah, they're working on them, as if there were doubts. Given that practically their whole booth was Nekopara, I'd have been more shocked if they weren't working on these. And I could break down Nekopara, but frankly, it's such a well-known franchise at this point that I feel like it's kind of redundant to do so, and I just don't really have much to add to the conversation that hasn't already been said about the series. I might play Nekopara after, but I'm still needing to play Volume 4, and I'm not really in a rush to do that, given that I wasn't exactly a huge fan of Volume 3, but I feel like I am a little too deep into the series to back out now. And in terms of Inupara, you know, I could sit here and talk about how this feels like Nekopara, but with a new coat of paint, and there's not a big reason to play it, but let me keep it 100 with y'all. I already decided I was playing this when I saw the Siberian Husky. So Jast came out this year and decided to choose violence. Jast, for the runtime of their panel, decided that they were going to shove about as much stuff into their panel as they could, and they still somehow had time for Q&A, which is pretty admirable considering that they not only gave updates on previously announced stuff, but also announced new projects and explanations as to why some of their physical editions have been delayed. I'm going to focus specifically on the new announcements in order to keep consistent with the other panels, but if you want to hear everything, I recommend watching the panel for yourself. All I will say in terms of the updates is Tsumaga, well, at least some progress is better than no progress, and ouch. Oh, and slow damage, eventually. I don't even know where to start with this. Even the fucking title for this isn't safe for life, let alone safe for work. Like, the artwork, I can't even show the box art for this. I'm not saying the full title of this either, because I'm not ready for a voice clip of me saying those words in that order to be up on the internet. Now, I could sum up the plot for you, but why? Look at the name of this. That's gonna tell you more than I ever could. And I'm not judging you if you're excited for this. I'm gonna be honest. There's very little that this game could do to be any less of my thing. What I will say though is, shout out to that one guy that got really excited when this was announced.
Oh, who's familiar with Inyochu?
Nope.
Who knows the name Inyochu? We've got a fella in the back who's very, very excited.
This is already translated and edited, so once QA is done, it'll be coming out sometime not too long from now. If this is your thing, well, you already know. If this isn't your thing, you already know. Gears of Dragoon, sadly not that Dragoon, Fragments of a New Era, is an HRPG done by the team that did the Venus Blood games, which I've heard good things about, but at least from what I've gathered, have some stuff in there that isn't exactly my thing. Now, I've not played them because I'm super not into HRPGs, because what you usually have to do to get the H in these games, along with the actual H itself, is the opposite of what I consider a good time. Then you have the others that are just, well, okay. Regardless, Gears of Dragoon is a dungeon crawler where you play as a character who is on the quest into a dungeon to obtain a great power hidden within it, as well as to get a better understanding of his father's last words about the dungeon. Now, the art looks good. As with most of the Ninetale games, I like the color palette and the fact that the monster designs are a little bit weird. The issues that I mentioned earlier are probably going to be the reason I'm hesitant to pick this up as well, but if this is your thing, you're probably going to want to check this out. It appears to be in QA with the translation being done, so it might not be coming out too long from now. Tokyo Hero Project is from the makers of My Girlfriend is the President and Oni Goko, and it's a visual novel where a down-on-his-luck guy gets invited to a secret society who fights superheroes in Tokyo. I'm just gonna be honest, I don't really have a lot to add to this. I imagine that if you're a fan of the other games done by Alcott, you'll probably like this one as well. It gives me the same vibes as being a slice-of-life comedy with some ridiculous premises and characters. I'm curious about it, but it's not going to be a day one purchase for me. Now, the last two announcements at the panel have caused a little bit of a stir. They're the ones that seem to be talked about the most from visual novel fans since the panel happened. So first up, holy shit, we're getting Gore Screaming Show. I can't believe we're actually getting a translation of this that's going to be able to be purchased in the US. If you're not familiar with what Gore Screaming Show is, it's one of, if not the most infamous horror VN that has not been translated into English. It's done by Black Sick, who are known for making visual novels that both push the boundaries of good taste, but also put in a real effort to try to create compelling stories. Now, if I'm keeping it 100, I've not played any Black Sick games yet, but it strikes me as the sort of visual novel equivalent of like a 70s and 80s exploitation horror film, where they're trashy to be sure, but they also have this sort of ridiculous vibe to them that makes them something notable, and people seem to really like them. And I guess the other thing about Black Sick that I at least respect is the fact that they're not trying to mislead you with what they are. I mean, if you look at just the game titles that they've got, when you've got titles such as Sadistic Blood, Min Dead Blood, and Gun Katana Non-Human Killer, they're not trying to fool you with what you're getting into. Gore Screaming Show in particular is known for having, at least from what I hear, a well-developed horror mystery story that also has a bunch of shit that would make most people run away as fast as they possibly can. And to put it in perspective, there was an article I read on GameFAQs a long time ago when I was first getting into visual novels, and it had a list of horror visual novels with the tags of safe for work and not safe for work, which usually either just said yes or no. Gore Screaming Show's tag said, not at all, not even a single bit, which probably says more about that than I ever could. Regardless, people are hyped for this. Me, I'm curious about it. Some of the things I've seen about the game really gives me the vibe that there's going to be some content in this that I'm not going to like, but its infamy does make me curious about it, if only to get a better understanding of it. In that same sense that you'd kind of want to know what people are talking about when they immediately tell you that you should not play or watch a certain thing. In terms of when it comes out, maybe this year. We'll see. Finally, Tokyo Necro. Let's fucking go! Tokyo Necro is by Nitro Plus, which is one of the biggest VN developers in the world, and I'm a pretty big fan of most of what they put out. Tokyo Necro was the game that they did for their 15th anniversary in Japan, and it's well regarded as a certified banger. I'm generally trying to keep myself in the dark on the story as much as I could, but everything that I've gathered says that there's necromancers, there's martial arts, there's zombies, there's Yuri, there's crazy cyberpunk tech. What more could you want? The best news? It seems like there's been a pretty decent amount of work done to it already, so hopefully we might see it in the next year. Finally, the Manga Gamer panel. This one was weird. More so than the other panels. I felt like this was a company trying to show their wares more than a panel to talk to the audience about stuff and announce things. Now, I understand at a company panel, you want to try and sell yourself and the products that you have to an audience, and you can't just assume that everyone at your panel has already heard of your stuff and bought it. But man, it felt like 5 minutes of this was dedicated to announcements, and the rest of this was just dedicated to talking about stuff that's already come out or been announced. And I just made it feel like a slog. That being said, not all was lost. They claim that they were the biggest visual novel localizer in the West, which is definitely a claim.
In 8, we are probably the biggest VN localization and publishing company here in the West.
This pie chart showed up, and while I know there's a very obvious thing to point out here, I won't ignore the elephant in the room. Shout out to that 2%, what a bunch of legends. And also, we got updates on Rants 9 and 10. We might get them in the next decade. Also, things got even a little emotional. The panel made you feel things. Because I know that non-answer to whether or not we're getting Kara no Shoujo, the final episode, made me want to cry.
Hello? Oh, okay.
Yes.
So why isn't, and what is it going to take for us to get Kara no Shoujo, the last episode, translated?
That's loaded.
Oh, he's exactly.
I think we have to talk to our license acquisition team about what's going on with Innocent Brain. I'm not familiar with what's the issues there.
You should do that.
Regardless, we did get 2 announcements, and one of them I'm kind of interested in. It's a BL visual novel about a group of people who are trying to defend themselves from demons which are overrunning the world. They're trained as warriors, and as they age, they defend their community against the demons as they come in waves. Takasu, who is the protagonist, is a strong warrior, but he's not been involved in a large battle until now. And now he must form a bond with his other warriors if he hopes to defend himself and humanity. Now maybe it's just the amazing opening and song that this had when it was shown, or it's the art style, but this has really caught my eye more so than a lot of the other things announced over the weekend. Maybe I should look deeper. Oh. Well then. I'm probably still reading it though. Oh, and Rance 3. Now this announcement in most cases would fall into that Nekopara Sekai Project area of no shit news, but with the recent self-publishing and translating of some of Alisoft's stuff, I was wondering why we hadn't heard anything about Rance 3. I was wondering if maybe, just maybe, Shirafune might pick it up, or Alisoft might do it themselves? Which, considering that it would have ended up on Joren if Shirafune did it, man, that would have been fun drama to see unfold. But, thankfully, that's not gonna happen. Will I pick it up? Maybe. And that's it. If there's anything I've missed, please let me know in the comments. Also, let me know what you were excited for the most over AX weekend, VNs or otherwise. You can follow me on Twitter at TheLocalWeeb7, and have a good one. I'll see y'all next time.